Hi, everyone. Before we dive in, Healthiest Humans and the Healthiest Voice podcast series is independent of my professional role as a pharmacist at Metro Market. The views expressed are for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered medical or professional advice. We strongly recommend consulting a qualified healthcare or professional advisor before making any decisions based on the information provided. With that, welcome to the Healthiest Voice podcast. I'm Christopher Mielen, your host and the founder of Healthiest Humans. Today, we're diving into a very interesting topic, morning and evening rituals for a calmer, more productive life. Our special guest, Nicolas Hubacz, I think I butchered that one. Sorry for that, Nick,
No problem.
is with us in the house to help us unpack this topic. Hi, Nick. Thank you for joining us. As you all know, in the overarching architecture of Healthiest Humans, our vision is to democratize human health, and our mission is to empower humans. Simply put, we are on a mission to help design the best health system in the world, which is the human body when it functions in its optimal state of being. With that, let me introduce Nicolas. Nicolas' passion lies in emerging technologies with a specific interest in neuromodulation, neurotech, cell and gene therapy, biotech, pharma, and healthcare related endeavors. Nicolas, we are so super grateful to have you on the podcast. The floor is yours.
Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to meet you. I currently work in neuromodulation, neuroscience. It's a beautiful world. Came from cell and gene therapy after I did my master's in biotech with a concentration in enterprise, and really have kind of found my niche to some extent. I really think, specifically neuromodulation has a great fit for the future of not just psychiatry, but holistically for society. And it's a pleasure to kind of talk about that as well as some of the rituals that go along with maybe influencing neuroscientific outcomes in your daily life. So pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. So for tonight, we have 5 questions here, Nick, that I want to unpack with you. And the first one that we want to unpack is what we call winning the mornings, right? We all know that mornings can be sort of chaotic. There's always family, emails, traffic, and whatnot. So what are simple, realistic habits that can help someone start the day feeling more in control and less stress, less chaotic?
Yeah, good question. I think the morning ritual is really important, especially in today's world. It tends to, we have a lot of remote workers, we all have in-person workers, and I think that really can and start to disseminate how we go about our daily lives. Specifically, I can talk from my circumstance. I work remotely, and one of the biggest things, it's very easy to kind of get up out of bed, go sit on the couch, start working early in the morning, and kind of I guess just start your day off without any really segmented outcomes of where you're trying to go. And so a big thing for me, and this is super simple, but right as you get up, I think it's super important to get dressed. And I know that seems very simple, but from a remote work standpoint, getting into clothes that are going to make you feel like you're starting the day, it translationally within your head makes you realize that you're not now in your sleep environment, your comfortable environment, you're now working. And I think it's a really easy thing to do. When we talk about kind of the in-person environments and going there, for me, it's about having rituals that put me in the right mindset. So understanding what my body reacts to, if it's too much coffee, it's not enough coffee, it's important to understand as I go about my daily morning routine. And so I guess for the remote environment, like I said, getting dressed right away, getting up, performing the tasks that you need to do, I think that's vitally important. If you're already going to work and, hey, I have to be at work at 8:30, I have to be at work at 7:30, making sure the routine is consistent. And I think that kind of evolves into another rule, which is, consistency is really everything in what you do. You can do a lot of things, but if you're not doing it consistently, it's not going to mean a lot. And so, we're talking about routine, and I think at the basis of routine is this idea of consistency. So, with regards to myself, I find that, right as I get up, getting dressed, having a glass of coffee or a cup of coffee, and then starting to, go through my daily kind of what I want to do today and move on from there is super important. And it's worked for me definitely very well. So.
Yeah, I think there's clear science behind that.
Mhm.
I know the military is doing that too. Specifically when you get up in the morning to make your bed, dress well, and kind of set the tone for the day almost. You know what I'm saying? Because if you get up and you hang
Mhm.
around 15, 20 minutes doing all sorts of things, and then you go back to bed and make your bed later on, it really feels like you set the wrong tone from a
Yeah.
um, uh, I would say a mindset, right? So I totally agree on that one.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and Crystal, I would even add, I think it's kind of funny because when we grow up, our parents are always telling us to make our beds and things like that. And as a kid, that's the last thing you want to do in the morning. And it's interesting because as I get older, obviously I'm in my 20s now, but the more I kind of think about that, and the more I think about the dynamic that switches in your head once you've made your bed, as I'm living by myself, as I'm running my own life, it's an interesting dynamic. So it's kind of I guess as you come of age, you kind of start to realize things. But it's really cool, and I think things like that are super important to make sure you're not slipping into bad habits or bad mindsets.
so talking about getting up, do you get up at the same time? Do you recommend getting up at the same time in the morning too?
Yeah, I mean, I get up at 7:20 every day. I think it's as hard as it is. I think it's super super important to get up as I wouldn't say as early as you can, but the earlier you can get up and kind of start your routine, the better. Um, as somebody who works from home, luckily I've controlled my routine pretty, pretty in like a sequential manner, and so it's easier for me to say I have to wake up at 7:20 every day. But there are times in your life, maybe when you're not working, maybe when you could just be on vacation. A lot of these things, but having this mindset that you're going to do things consistently, I think, is super super important. And yeah, waking up is one of those, and making sure you're in a routine, I think, can help a lot of people in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I agree with that. So 5 years ago, when I started transforming my health, one of the things that I actually started doing was exactly that. I set my alarm, and I basically wake up not with a buzzing alarm, but an alarm that kind of have this birds songs. You know what I'm saying? So
Mm.
it's
Mhm.
more like a natural tone waking up, and I honestly believe that that's how it ought to be. I think from a calm standpoint, instead of just being almost shocked into existence the next morning. So as far as that's concerned, I completely agree with that. Now I'm so a creature of habit in terms of waking up. I kind of
Mhm.
wake, it's almost clock on the clock, awake in the morning before I actually get up. So and I think it really serves me well, and I really try to not
Mhm.
bend that um, rhythm and consistency when I go on vacation. I mean,
Mhm.
you'd think, yeah, you're on vacation, you want to sleep in. I've tried that too. That simply just doesn't work for me. So if I'm consistent, even on vacation, or when we go on road trips and stuff like that, it just works better. So I'm
Yeah.
in with that one on you. Mhm.
Yeah, it's a great point. And even on top of that, I would add that it's a lot easier to wake up consistently too if your nighttime routine is as consistent as your morning routine. Honestly, like your body it gets accustomed, and it's very, your body's adaptive, but it's also it likes routine because it knows what it's going to get. It knows what it's going to receive. And so when you're also going to bed at the right time and doing the same things before bed, that's it. Even though I know that's another part of our conversation, that also leads into being able to wake up at the right time and not want to fall back asleep and everything like that. And also, it's funny when you bring up the noises, because I think I was just looking at waking up with light, and there's these balls that you can actually put next to your bed that will basically mimic, especially if you're in, I used to live in Boston, which is predominantly gray during the winters. And it's a really interesting dynamic. So I've thought about that too. I haven't looked at it, but it's a really, really cool idea. And it's something that I think as we learn more about sleep, from a neuroscientific level, there's a lot of stuff that can go into that. But generally, we're finding really good results and really good research around this. So it's cool to see kind of how this will evolve going forward.
Oh, absolutely. And not only that, I know it's that light, that happy light.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, what you also want to do is to turn on all the lights in the house. Don't turn it down. I mean, we have this tendency to say, oh, it's still early in the morning. But actually, in fact, the thing that actually wakes you up is that stimulus, that's, stimulate your brain, the light, the light in the morning. So it's super important to get the bright lights on so that the melatonin can start toning down, right? Deregulation of the melatonin. So yeah, that's awesome. Moving on to the next question. And at nighttime, I mean, people struggle to shut off, Give an example. At night when I get home, I bike from work, and I get on my bike at 8 o'clock at night, and then I bike home. And then when I get here at 8:30, I'm 8:30, 8:35, I'm pretty up and going. So what will you say is a practical evening ritual to just help people kind of relax before they go to bed? I mean, I'm not working every night till 8 o'clock, but what do you think is consistent that people can do to kind of just help them wind down at nighttime?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I hear a lot of stuff about blue light before bed, and making sure we're not on our phones, which it realistically just never happens in today's environment. I think the ideal landscape is you being off your phone an hour before you're in bed, which in today's world, it's pretty hard to be disconnected. So, I would say that would be great. But realistically, I think some of the big things you can do, and one thing that I like to do is there's this like Apple Fitness app that I use basically, and they have this thing called like wind down. And it's essentially like it's 7 minutes of stretching and then basically 3 minutes of breathing. And it takes 10 minutes at the end of the day. I found that, and I'm going to be honest, I would like to be more consistent with it, but I'm definitely not as consistent as I should be. I would say most likely on average when I'm doing it, it's probably 5 days a week. On the weekends, it's a little different. But when I am doing it during the week, it's the breathing and then also the stretching. And that I've noticed that when I do that, because I also have a Whoop, I can track my sleep and how that sleep actually goes. And I've noticed that my sleep scores and things like that have gotten a lot better after utilizing kind of like that stretching meditation. Really, I mean, 10 minutes a day, I don't think is that hard for anyone to do. Even if you're a CEO of a company, if you're leading that, it doesn't matter. I think everyone has 10 minutes to divert to themselves. And that's really helped me. And on top of that, there's really simple things like not having caffeine, 8 hours prior to bed. I think that's something, a lot of us can kind of succumb to. I definitely love having a coffee at like 4:30, 4 p.m. for myself. But the less caffeine you have prior to 8 hours of bed, you tend to get a lot better sleep there as well. But just with regards to my routine, I think that's really important. Simply like I go to bed typically around, or I get into bed at like 10:30. I'm usually asleep by like 11:30, 12. I think my body understanding that is also vitally important. So making sure consistency in when you go to bed is equally as important as making sure you're stretching and doing these meditation things. Because at the end of the day, once again, I think life is kind of a series of patterns, and your body recognizes that. And if your body kind of gets out of that pattern, it's or consistently out of some pattern, it can kind of affect it. So that for me is really vital, I guess.
Two things that I've done in the past and what I'm still doing is, and I think works wonders, if you actually start getting rid of the lights, just like we want to activate the lighting in the morning and the impulse in the brain in the morning, you actually want to start toning it down as soon as the sun goes down, to have really dim lights in the house. And the second thing is breathing, deep breathing exercises. And I think you can actually combine that with the stretching that you mentioned. I just think that activate the entire sleep system to say, hey, you know what, it's time now. I can relax and put the day to rest and move on.
Yeah.
Another thing that I've done in the past that actually works really well is to just write down. I just sit down and plan my day for the day. So I do a little bit of thinking and putting my thoughts together for what I actually want to accomplish the next day. That's another thing that I think has a lot of value as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think too, people get very locked into the idea, and I think this is kind of part of the issue, is that when we talk about morning routines and nighttime routines or whatever it is, people tend to get locked down in this idea that it just has to be done consistently every day. And and don't get me wrong, I'm talking about consistency, but also, for people starting out and for people trying to be as consistent as they can or start these routines, it's really just about taking, maybe it's a one day in the week you start it, maybe it's 2 days in the week, and in that way you kind of build that routine that's going to work for you. I think that's really important. And this is kind of in the realm of just what we're talking about, consistency, not even just in these routines, but really in your daily life. If you take a little bit and you start doing it little by little, it'll slowly build up and you'll get consistent with that as well. I think if you try to go full bore into something like meditation for 30 minutes a day, it's just typically people don't hold those things together. So I think it's really important to tell people that, try a little bit, find what works for you, and you can add on as you keep going. And I think in that way, people can build more consistent routines because they're adapting it around themselves rather than what they're being told necessarily. Even though the stuff they're being told is really good, I think it's also important to consider yourself and kind of how you respond to these things. So
yeah, that's awesome. So the next question, I want to zoom in on the snooze button. Which kind of ties in, the go to bed at night and waking up in the morning. But that very action of the snooze cycle, what do you think about that? When the alarm goes off, what do you do? Do you get up right away, or do you spend a few minutes in bed, thinking about the day, pondering what you're going to do before you get up? How do you go about that? And I think the point is, in the whole thing is to have consistency in that as well and know what you're doing and why you're doing that, right? So how do you over that? Do you hit the snooze button and get up, or what do you do?
I sometimes it's a little bit of both. I would say usually I'm up within 5 minutes of my alarm going off. So in that case, right as my alarm goes off, sometimes I'll sit in bed for a little bit. I don't necessarily think there's any issue with that. I mean, your body's recovering from sleep or coming out of sleep. So your body is kind of in a state that tends to be less, I guess, reactive to the things around you. So getting up slowly in the sense that you're taking 5 minutes to get up, I don't think it's actually an issue. But that at certain points, sometimes I get right up as my alarm goes off. Maybe I have something to do that day that's on my brain and my mind is already kind of thinking about it. And in that case, I tend to get up pretty quickly. But, I would like to say I always did that, but I just don't. And, sometimes my body just tends to wait there for a little bit. So, yeah.
So what I've done in the past that actually works really well is I have this foot massage roller next to my bed. So what I do is when my alarm goes off, I roll out of the bed. And by the way, my alarm is not in the bedroom. My alarm is actually in the kitchen.
Oh,
So
wow.
I roll out of bed, and then I will roll my feet on the massage roller. And then after I've done that, I get up. So it's kind of just activating my whole system from the bottom up. So that's what I do. I get up right away.
Yeah, that's a really good, actually, I've heard about the alarm in the kitchen before. I think that's a really good idea. My only issue is my alarm's on my phone, so I get up right next to my bed. But, even that being said, if I wanted to institute the not having my phone an hour before bed and not answering emails and things like that, I think it would be great to have my stuff in the kitchen. And granted, I can do that stuff on my laptop too, but that's interesting. And I do like the foot rolling aspect. I actually, I was just talking to somebody about stretching in the morning and things like that too as well, which I think is another important dynamic that you could institute. Once again, hard for me because I like to get up once I get my routine going and working, but it's also something that if I was really prioritizing every aspect of my life, I think that was something I would love to institute kind of going forward.
So moving to the next question, a little bit about time management sort of and making something a habit. What would you say if you have only 10 to 15 minutes in the morning? Because most of the time, if we're honest, it's kind of a rush, right? To get to work or whatever to do. So if you have 10 to 15 minutes in the morning for self-care, what's the one habit you'd recommend to make a bigger difference and impact on your health?
Wow, that's a good question. You know, I I would say holistically, once again, it goes back to routine. And the biggest thing that's going to have an impact on me is a routine that I find is going to work for myself. And so it's hard to say there's one thing, because this idea of like a magic bullet for our health is kind of it's just not a real thing. And so I really think it's a stepwise, where it's like it's a multiple different things that go into one that's going to create maybe that morning routine that's perfect for you. And so, if there's one thing, like I said, that I would add in addition, the stretching would be great. I think allowing your body, from a neuroscientific perspective, and really kind of brushing out all the melatonin that's in your system, it would be good to wait actually for an hour after I woke up, to 15 to 30 minutes, maybe after I woke up, to have coffee, because that actually disrupts your natural melatonin flow. And so that's another thing that's really interesting and maybe important to integrate. But for me specifically, I would say it's not about one thing; it's about multiple things and doing them consistently, like I've already said. So whether it's me getting up, brushing my teeth right away, or me getting up, having a cup of coffee, writing down my goals for the day. I think that's really, really important. And we talked about goal setting and things like that. And I think if you can follow that logic path consistently, or at least 5 days a week, you'll naturally start to see yourself be more progressive in the way you work, the way you go about your day, your feelings as an individual. So yeah, I know that's kind of a circumventing the actual answer, which is what I exactly do, but I think it's a collection of all these things.
Yeah, I like that. I really like that. Here's what I've done in the past. Matter of fact, I still do that. So when I get up and I walk to my cell phone and I turn off the alarm clock, I turn around and I grab 2 big glasses of water and just down 2 big glasses of water right out of the gate. Doing that, and then maybe pausing on my caffeine, to your point of the melatonin. I do make a cup of coffee, but I don't drink it right away. I drink it over the next 45 minutes. But just right out of the gate, I drink my 2 big glasses of water, 2 8 ounces of water. So I know at least I start my day kind of in a hydrated state, right? So that's what I do. And I would say, I think that helps, to just kind of get everything moving, So
yeah, that's a really good point. And I've actually, I've heard about the glass of water in the morning. I heard that's really, really important. I've heard some really good data on that. I think actually I watched Andrew Huberman podcast about that. And they were talking about having a glass of water, or maybe it was 16 ounces of water in the morning, and what it does for, the cellular dynamics, as well as kind of the neuroscientific perspective in activating your brain. So that's an interesting dynamic. Definitely, you're a better man than I, Christo, for that. 100%.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I found that actually works really good for me. So the last question that I have here is, it's all about intentionality, right? And busy work is busy, family is busy, social media is busy, and we all have responsibilities. So to get peace of mind, okay, and improve our productivity, what's the last one thing that you can maybe add from the architecture of your entire day? From we go to bed till we get up and go to bed at night. What's the one thing that you would say we can add to our daily architecture in order to make it more productive?
Yeah. I think overarchingly, mindset is a really interesting idea. And I think it's something that can get lost a lot of the time. And as we work, we kind of get involved in this day-to-day grind of, this is our job, this is what we do. But, at the end of the day, the most important thing that you're doing is having an effect on society and influencing society in a positive way. So, when we think about things like this, and the reason I'm bringing this up is that dynamic of how we're going to influence society that day, I know it's a really big idea, but at the end of the day, if we can say we're positively contributing to what we're doing and how we're growing things, this is exactly why I work in neuroscience, neuromodulation, neurotech, because I can, on a day-to-day basis, see the results of what I'm doing. And so on the daily, we're not going to have we're not necessarily going to have always the best days. So I think falling back on this idea and this mindset that we're looking to contribute to society in a positive way is super, super important. And I know this, I mean, you're not necessarily going to, like you said, maybe think of this every day, but the dynamics around being more progressive and making sure you're still motivated every day, especially, you know, as we get more involved in our lives and kind of, you know, at some point, you know, when I become a parent, that's another thing, you know, you worry about your kids' lives, and now you worry about a lot of things. And so understanding that what you're doing and how you're going about things is, you know, the betterment of yourself is also for the betterment of society, things along those lines. If you can hold those dynamics in place, those are really what drive you to be successful, what drive you to eventually, you know, be the person you're going to be in the future. And so, yeah, just overarchingly, I think at the end, like, it's about having these core mindsets in place of how we look at ourselves, how we look at our impact. And, you know, on a day-to-day basis, that will help you drive what you're going to do instead of slack off that day, or what you're going to, you know, what your goal is over the next, you know, year or 2 years or 5 years, 10 years. I think that's really, really important. So if you can hold those dynamics, I think a lot of people can have a, you know, a lot of success in life.
Yeah, I really like that. I really like that. So I want to open it up to the audience here. Anybody has any questions? Mark, you have a question?
I have a question. I'm trying to think. I mean, I really like that last point of, like, you know, when you're talking about, like, you know, how you're contributing to society, and sometimes it's always just about, like, I think you can always think about that in different ways. Sometimes it comes through your work, right? Sometimes that comes through, like, for me, there's some organizations I volunteer with that I really like. I'm trying to help other people, and really where, like, I see my joy in. So, I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. And I think too, to your point of, like, there's so much we're learning about sleep and all these things, and it's a little bit like about routine, but also giving yourself some grace too. Just like when you start on a workout journey, you can't necessarily work out every day, but if you work out 10 minutes 3 times a week, that's better than nothing, right? Then you start to build on that. Versus if you start trying to work out 5 days a week for an hour and you haven't worked out in 5 years, that's the recipe for failure, right?
Yeah. 100%.
So yeah, and I was just curious, like, what other things are you thinking about, as far as routine and things that maybe you've you know, are curious about or starting to experiment with? And I'll just lead you with, like, kind of one for me that about 9 months ago I bought a sauna, and, like, it's every day, at least Monday through Friday, it's my 15 to 20 minutes in the morning. I'm in there, right? And it also kind of gives me that time to, like, do my devotional or whatever I want to do in the morning. I'm in there, I got a little red light therapy, and I'm kind of sweating it out, raising my body temperature up. And you definitely need the 2 glasses of water before you get in the sauna.
Yeah, that's actually,
it helps with
that's
that
a really
too.
good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. You know, honestly, one thing I've been super obsessed with recently is this idea of kind of shaping your, like, from a neuro mechanistic standpoint, basically allowing your brain to function for, you know, the next 10 years, next 20, next 30, next 40 years, in a really high achieving way. And so I've actually been hyper focused on things like creatine for neuroprotection. There's work with methylene blue, if you've ever heard of that, for neuroprotection. Very, very interesting dynamics. And there's some really interesting results and interesting data. And methylene blue, yes, is that dye that's used for genes, which is very, very interesting. But recently, you know, when I say this, maybe the last 20 years, it's been used in a lot of psychiatric conditions, and now it's transitioning into, like, low dose healthy populations, where we're using these basically, this dye to, you know, allow yourself to become more neuroprotective. And I say neuroprotective, really keep your brain at a high functioning state, which is something that, you know, as we get older, as, you know, even myself at 26 or 27 now, you know, you do notice things. And so, and actually, even after I had COVID, I had a lot of issue like memorizing things, or just my memory in general was really foggy. And it's something that I became more aware of. But nevertheless, long story short, I've been really hyper focused on neuroprotective mechanisms. Creatine is one. Creatine's a really interesting one. And then, you know, methylene blue is also one. There's also something called TDCS, which is transcranial direct current stimulation. Another really interesting dynamic, typically used in psychiatric patients, but it's finding its way into healthier populations for cognitive enhancement. for memory tasks, for learning, things like that, that are, I think, vitally important as you get older. So, and I do really like the sauna thing. Actually, I haven't done it as much, but I love every time I get in those. It's absolutely amazing. And they have one at the gym that I go to, so it's really, really cool. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it's game changer for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the creatine thing is also interesting too, because I know that's sort of evolved over time, and I think about them a few years younger than you or older than you, a few, like maybe 20. But I think over time, like when I was in high school, like creatine was the thing for kind of like building muscle, and I think it's also evolved as to there's probably better forms of it than I know. I had some like stomach issues with taking that for a while, but I think it's super evolved over time and the quality of it. So that's a very interesting thing to research.
Yeah, and honestly, like it is used. It's funny because it definitely, in the workout community, that retains water in your muscles. It helps your body recover, but it also bloats you a little bit. But they've used, actually recently, I just read a study. They combined creatine with SSRIs, which SSRIs, if you're not familiar, are just they're medication that's typically used to treat depression in adults or adolescents. But the neuroprotective mechanisms combined with these SSRIs they outperformed the SSRIs by themselves. And then now what they're doing is actually translating that and just using and seeing if they can use creatine to maybe it might be mitigate like a diagnosis of major depressive disorder. Maybe it's early on you're trying to use creatine, but really in general, it's kind of interesting how the dynamics, I guess, come about, because it really was just thought of as a workout thing. And same with methylene blue. I mean, it was used to dye clothes at the Levi factory for jeans. So it's like, who would have thought that something like that would have neuroprotective mechanisms and the way people ingest it and the way we go about it. Obviously, this is stuff, it's dosage based, but nevertheless, it's kind of interesting. And I think it's important, and there's only like a few reasons these things come to light, which is, we're getting more and more involved on the science side and understanding more of it. So it's cool. It's really cool. And the work with, like I said, once again, I really love the sauna. So I really appreciate bringing that up. Actually, it's a great job.
Yeah, I agree with that, Mark. I think the science is actually saying that, all-cause mortality is, you can actually, strip it down to 20% or something like that, with doing sauna. So, and the red light, included in that. I mean, there's massive benefits of doing that. Mm-hmm. So everybody that I talk to and ask me about that, I highly recommend the sauna. So winding down the conversation here, Nicolas, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. It was fun having you on the podcast tonight. I think we have a few nuggets that we can work on, maybe a few tips and tricks up our sleeve now. So I really appreciate your time, and looking forward to maybe have you in the future again, because I think there's a lot of overlap with what you're doing and what I'm actually working on with Healthiest Humans, So looking forward to have you on in the future again.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Krista. And I think things like this are super important for kind of disseminating information into the general public. So I appreciate taking the time, and I know it's not easy to put these things together, but it's super, super important. And, it's been amazing to be able to come on and talk to you guys.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks. Super impactful having you. It was great.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Have a great evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.